Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. If you're someone who has experienced painful periods, listen up. First of all, you are not alone. While painful periods are common, you should know that they are not normal. Here's where the Period Pain Clinic by Day comes in. The Period Pain Clinic offers a 360-degree plan to tackle period pain with a personalized pain relief routine, support from vetted specialists, access to innovative treatments, fast-track diagnosis of your gynecological health conditions, clinically proven lifestyle recommendations, and more. You'll also learn about conditions that could be affecting your period, such as PCOS, fibroids, endometriosis, and more. Go to www.yourday, that's DAYE.com, and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at checkout. We talk a lot about sex education, but when I'm shopping for products to support my sexual wellness, exploration, and expression, I head to the experts at Lion's Den. Lion's Den is an adult retailer with over 50 locations nationwide and hundreds of your favorite brands. They have everything you need to explore and express your sexual side. Right now, you can use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off your purchase in-store and online at lionsden.com. Follow them on social media at Lions Den Adult on Instagram and TikTok for exclusive offers, deals, and giveaways. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Sexpert Sessions episode. We are here with Cathi.
Hey, DB.
And Sadie.
Hi, everybody.
And I am so excited. We're missing M today, but hopefully M will be at the next one. But today we have a really, really exciting topic. We are talking about the Challengers movie, starring, of course, Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Feist. Was that how you say his name? Don't know. But those are the three stars of the movie. And if you haven't seen this movie, get your tush to that couch and rent it for, I guess, $15 on Prime, or to the theater for, more than that probably these days. But I think it's worth it personally. And we'll get into likes and dislikes in a little bit. But first, we're going to play overrated or underrated. And the thing that I want to hear from Sadie and Cathi is sex pillows. Are they overrated or underrated? I'll let you two answer first. I'll throw it to Cathi first. Let's see what you think.
So I feel like despite how many various pillows for this explicit purpose we have used and or advertised throughout the series of the podcast, I don't have one, which I'm going to think my answer is going to be then underrated, because you can just use a normal pillow, I would assume. Although I am interested in those kind of chairs that people get that are specifically for these purposes. That seems like
the ones that hang, or
no, I saw one the other day and somebody was using it to read, and the people are like, that's not what that's for. But it has kind of a little booty hole, and is a nice little shape. I don't know, kind of an abstract art. I guess you could think it's a reading chair, but
you sure can.
Normal pillows, I'd say just use a normal pillow.
Okay. Yeah. Sadie, what do you think?
Yeah, I've also never used an official one, so I'm gonna say overrated, because I think you can do just fine with some creative use of couch pillows and just, I don't know, the regular stuff you already have on your bed. So I'm all about repurposing and reusing when you already have something.
You're saying reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah, reduce, reuse, recycle, but if a sponsor wants to send me one, I won't say that.
But Lion's Den, if you're listening, Sadie needs a sex pillow. Yeah, I share the wealth. I have one of these, and I feel like my body doesn't work on it. I'm just kind of this is equal to being on a bed for me, regardless of the position that I'm in. I feel like I can't get my body to a tilt enough to make it actually worth the time of using it. Because, it's like a cheese wedge. So it's it is different in that it has an incline. But I do think that most times when I've tried it, I've been I don't really know if this is helpful. Although There was a sex pillow that Lion's Den did send me that has like an insert for a magic wand, so that theoretically you could be like on your belly, and then like your partner could be coming in from behind, and so that would give both of you stimulation. So perhaps that's worth it. All right, guys, let's talk about this Challengers movie. Okay, there are spoilers ahead. Warning, if you're listening and have not seen this movie, go watch it and then come listen to this episode. But how we're going to do this basically is kind of go through like a description of what happens in each scene and then do a little bit of react to it to see what we think about it, any thoughts and feelings. So the film stars Zendaya as Tashi, Mike Faist as Art, and Josh O'Connor as Patrick, and it's directed by Luca Guadagnino, which is the same director as Call Me By Your Name. I just wrote one note, hot, next to this. If you haven't seen Call Me By Your Name, I understand that Armie Hammer is disgusting and is canceled, but if you could get past that, or if you saw it before he got canceled, you would agree this film is hot. So here's a film synopsis. Challengers is a 2024 American romantic sports drama film. I'm sorry, no one has written that in the history. Maybe Love and Basketball, if you guys have seen that movie in like the 90s or the early 2000s, perhaps that would also be that. But anyway, romantic sports drama film directed by Luca from a screenplay by Justin Kuritzkis. Don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but here we go. It follows a professional tennis champion named Art, played by Mike Faist, who plots a comeback with the help of his wife, Zendaya, a former tennis prodigy who retired after an injury, as he goes up against another player named Patrick, Josh O'Connor, who also happens to be his former best friend and his wife's former lover. Ooh, sexy. This film is presented in a non-linear narrative. They jump timelines a lot from the present day to the past when they're in high school, college, after college, etc. And this movie is really about power dynamics, lust, love of tennis, ? We'll get into that. Sexuality, morals, and competition. So let's get into it and really just start with what everyone wants to talk about, which is this threesome, which is what they really made a big deal about all of the commercials with this threesome. They teased you with it. It was kind of all over the media. But let me read a description of what happens, and then we'll share some thoughts. So in 2006, high schoolers and childhood best friends Patrick Zweig and Art Donaldson win the boys' junior doubles title at the U.S. Open. They meet Tashi Duncan, Hottie Zendaya, a highly lauded young tennis player prospect to whom Patrick and Art are both attracted. The three meet in a hotel room. While talking, Tashi's describing her passion for tennis and the relationship between the players in their rally. And in the ensuing counter, the two boys kiss Tashi and each other hot, but Tashi ends the threesome before it escalates to sex. And with Patrick and Art kind of playing each other in the junior singles final the next day, Tashi says she's going to give her phone number to whoever wins. Patrick wins the match and later signals to Art that they boned by placing the ball in the neck of the racket prior to serving, which is a tick of Art's. So anyway, that's what happened in the movie. I want to know, what did we think of this threesome scene? What did it do well? What was it missing? Did it measure up to kind of our anticipation from the commercials and from all the hype?
Yeah, I feel like I had seen so many memes of this scene before I actually saw the movie, with like the two guys kissing her neck, and then also just the scene of her leaning back on the bed. I've seen so many memes of that. And then I thought it was pretty tame compared to what I was expecting from just like the hype around this movie and the fact that people had really glommed onto this particular scene. I have to say, though, I think part of that for me, too, was I didn't realize their age in this scene. The jumping around in time, I found actually kind of confusing about this movie. I know they did a good job signposting it, but if you kind of like, we're looking over here for a second, or just like they also jump without telling you, I think I thought that was going to be happening like in the real time where they are currently playing each other in this tournament in New Rochelle, and not when they were in college and when they had just met her. Like, I thought it was more like opening up their marriage or something like that, which we can talk about. I guess like she kind of does that. But So maybe it was just, because the two boys were 17 in that scene or something like that. But yeah, I thought it was a little tame.
I thought it was really steamy. I don't know. I thought it was interesting to not actually show any intercourse. Like, we were basically seeing foreplay. It was really cool to see the woman in this trio basically in the driver's seat. Like, she was kind of bossing them around and calling the shots. And you could just kind of tell it was like, I don't know, I just felt like she was just kind of fulfilling her own fantasy and like taking these boys on like for a ride a little bit. And it was really fun to watch.
I agree. I agree with both of you. I did expect more and was kind of like, yeah, like blow each other. But obviously they were going to do that. Like, they were 17-year-olds. But yeah, like the power, right, is so clear here. This is like one of the first scenes where we really, really understand like how much power she has over these two people. And they literally like scramble from their seats on the floor to like go sit next to her because she's so desirable to them. She's so sexy to them. She's so like great at tennis. She's what everyone wants to be and who everyone wants to be with. And I think that makes so much sense for Zendaya as a person and for her character in this film. So I just loved the power dynamics. I love that as soon as she pointed to her neck, that's exactly where they kissed. Like Sadie said, like it was very much like her kind of living her fantasy. And I think women watching this movie, it's very much like wow, this is exactly what I could hope for if I were in a threesome with two dudes. That's kind of my take.
Yeah, and it's a type of threesome that, I mean, we don't really see that much threesome representation in the media, but I feel like anything that does come up is more so like a male fantasy around like having a bunch of women around. I don't know, it was really cool to see a woman basically getting off on these guys throwing themselves at her.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Cathi.
I was gonna say, I agree. I like the power dynamic switch of what you tend to see of like threesome representation in media. And she is just like so in control of the situation, both just kind of like with her sexuality and because she is like somebody they aspire to be. She's like, she's a professional. I guess she's still at Stanford at that point, but she is a much better known tennis star, and they're kind of like hoping they could be as successful as her in their careers. So the power dynamics there, I did enjoy.
Yeah, I think at this point they're technically in high school, but they know that Zendaya's character Tashi and Art are going to play at Stanford together. But something that I was also going to say is that when they're on the ground and they're chatting and they're like so like high school drinking beer, kind of like, sipping, and just the way that she's even sitting, you can just tell that like she is young, yet she has so much power over these people. And she kind of just asks them like, so you two never, and she doesn't really finish her sentence, but she's like, you guys fucking or what? Because like there's something going on here. And she gets them to admit, and this is kind of the first time that we see Patrick, in my opinion, be like, is he queer? Like, he's kind of the one who's maybe talking about like teaching Art to jerk off. Art seems like pretty straight, on the straight and narrow, like isn't really showing us that much that he's really that interested in hooking up with Patrick. But to me, the energy that I'm getting from Patrick in this scene is like, you're bi, like you are queer, you are interested in making out with Art. And then when they're in the threesome scene, Art and Patrick, like, she's putting their heads together and they're like, no, we couldn't. And then the climax, literally, of the scene is when they are kissing and we see Zendaya's face. The camera angle is such that we see her face kind of like, mwahahaha, kind of like she did what she wanted them to do. They're doing what exactly she wanted them to do. And yeah, I just think like the overtones and undertones of queerness in this movie like play out in various scenes, and we're gonna talk about the chair pulling of the leg. If you remember, there's like such a brief scene, but the internet is all over it, where Patrick moves Art's chair with his foot closer to him when they're like eating churros in the cafeteria. I'm like literally miming blowjobs. When they're eating churros in the cafeteria. And anyway, I think this scene is like one of the first ones where I'm kind of like, oh, Patrick is queer in my eyes, and like he is maybe has a crush on Art, or like maybe has had a crush on Art, or is interested in like pursuing hooking up with him. So loved it overall. I love that we're talking about this, really. I love that, like, even if it's missing something and if it like wasn't as hot as like we anticipated, Cathi, I think that it does serve something really, really cool and really important. Okay, so let's talk about the next scene. So Tashi and Art go to play college tennis at Stanford, while Patrick turns professional and begins a long-distance relationship with Tashi while on tour. Art privately suggests to Tashi that Patrick doesn't actually love her, and when Patrick visits Stanford, Art similarly suggests to him that Tashi doesn't take the relationship seriously. Patrick sees that Art is jealous and playfully teases him for trying to disrupt his relationship with Tashi. This is the chair scene. And later, Patrick and Tashi fight when she gives him unsolicited tennis advice during sex, and he says he views her as a peer and not his coach. In the match immediately after, which Patrick skips due to the fight, Tashi suffers a severe knee injury that ends her career, and Patrick returns to comfort Tashi, but she furiously demands that he leaves, with Art taking her side. Art aids Tashi in her recovery, but she is unsuccessful in resuming her tennis career. So yeah, this is kind of the note that I have here about the chair of like, did you guys notice this the first time around? He moves the chair closer to him, in parentheses, sexy, of course. But what power dynamics are at play between the three of them, and how do those dynamics impact Tashi and her narrative? And how generally do you think that jealousy plays a role in this film? Because it feels like it comes in and out pretty frequently.
I feel like, I mean, I totally noticed the chair moment. For sure. I mean, he's more sexually forward in general, Patrick is. But I actually think I was getting gay vibes from both of them. Like, I feel like Art was just a bit more repressed in general. And I think that's part of the reason why Tashi was drawn to Patrick over and over again, because he's more sexually forward. But like, part of me feels like, I don't know, maybe these guys who have grown up together have just had this underlying sexual tension this whole time, and only one of them is aware of it, because in the world we live in, a lot of that stuff gets driven underground, and you don't even know you're attracted to someone until you're making out. And he literally punched his boner afterwards.
Yeah.
After they were like, so, you know, like, obviously there's something there, and it's like, were you just totally unaware? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is bringing a couple things up for me. I feel like from that kind of initial scene and the story of them like learning how to jerk off together or teaching each other, that to me seemed more just like something that could be part of your friendship if you've been friends since a childhood, and perhaps not like them being in love with each other or attracted to each other. But then I think it does start to build, obviously, as the film goes on. This chair scene, that whole, like, just the whole scene, like not just the pulling the chair, but just like the way that they are physically close to each other and their faces, and they're eating the churros. I mean, you just did the thing too, you know. Like that whole scene, you're starting to kind of see it. And I think it's an interesting way that the film presents it too. It's sort of like in the cinematography as well. There's some of the opening scenes of them playing each other. You get the grunting going from like normal tennis grunting to more sexual grunting. And it's kind of using, like, you know, that's something I'm not a tennis person, so maybe that's a caveat. But I feel like that's something I've always thought of with tennis grunting, is like this sounds sexual, and they like just took it that extra step to actually explicitly make it that way. And they have been in competition against each other so much that like high level of competition has kind of bred into a more sexual interaction between the two of them. And then I think what Sadie just said about the kind of like one of them is more overtly sexual, and that's sort of why she's originally more attracted to Patrick. I think that is interesting in those dynamics are interesting in who she ends up marrying too, right? Like she, especially I think when she has this injury and she's no longer able to play tennis, she's not going to just like sit on the sidelines. And the fact that Patrick is like, no, you're not going to coach me. I'm like my own person, and is kind of the more aggressive, I guess, bolder and like less humble, I would say.
Less submissive.
Yeah. And that could be like what you're attracted to when you're 17 or 18. And then she ends up with kind of a more like stable, like team player, willing to be molded by her. I think they say at one point, like, wants to be Mrs. Tashi or Mr. Tashi. That's who she ends up being with. I think is even more important to her when she can't play tennis herself. So I think it's interesting the way that like their competitive energies translate into like the sexual vibes and the relationships that they have.
Totally. And this idea of control, right? Like she really wants to have control over Art's tennis career because she can't have control over her own career. And when Patrick makes it clear that she won't control him, that makes her maybe less likely to kind of like bend to him. Because she clearly is like the dominant figure in this film and in her relationships.
And I think with just like the injury too, it's like that was such a brutal injury. And honestly, actually for the like the end scene when they're playing and they're doing even more of that kind of like the grunting is sexual. I was really afraid somebody else was about to tear their ACL also at the end. But I think if you're competing at that level and you have an injury like that, you know immediately that your career is over. Like before she hit the ground, she knew her career was over. So that's probably what's going through her head when she's screaming at Patrick too. Like she probably already knows.
Totally. Yeah, I'm wondering, like, in terms of the power dynamics between her and Art, right? Like, we're gonna get into this scene a little bit later, but just in terms of like that scene where they're on the bed and he's kind of like groveling at her or kind of like, tell me that you'll leave me if I don't do well, right? Like he needs it too. Like it's kind of like they're all like, it's symbiotic in this like really interesting way. And it really made me think of The Phantom Thread. Have you guys seen that movie? With Danielle Day-Lewis?
Love that movie.
Okay. So The Phantom Thread is this like really wild, like fucked up, interesting relationship between this woman and this man. And spoiler alert for The Phantom Thread, but literally their power dynamics go so far that like she poisons him just so she can like take care of him, and it's like all sexual and like part of their relationship. Yeah, like pretty much it's just like this really intense thing. And I don't think this is quite like that, but I do kind of think that like there is something here around like, oh, I need you to tell me what to do because I'm not able to like live to my full potential unless like you're doming me around in this sense. And I feel like that is kind of Art's character and his personality.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was like a symbiotic thing between all three of them, which made me think, why does she have to pick? Like clearly, I feel like it works for all of them to just be in this little triad. So why is it that she has to pick? Is it literally just societal expectation?
I had the exact same feeling at the end of the movie. I'm like, all of these conflicts could have been resolved if they were just in a throuple.
Exactly. And it's not to say that wouldn't be complicated.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of
not
seems
to
like
simplify those kinds of relationships, but like they, or like just be like, just do this without, any context or whatever, would have probably, definitely required some conversations and things like that. But yeah, especially at the very beginning where she's like not necessarily picking one or the other. That feels like where it gets messy is when she picks somebody.
Yeah, she wanted all of it. She didn't have to pick.
Well, and she got it, right? So this is the perfect segue into our next part, right? Which is a few years later, Tashi reconnects with Art and becomes his coach, and the two begin a romantic relationship. He reveals that he and Patrick haven't spoken since the injury. Tashi and Art are now engaged, and Art's career is on the rise. Tashi and Patrick run into each other at the Atlanta Open and have a one-night stand, which Art secretly notices, which we learn later in the movie, right? And so Art knew about Tashi and Patrick, and this is what I wrote. Is this what the youth call simping? I feel like this is kind of like part of like what simping is. But also like, I think that she does have it all because Art does know about her escapades. He knew about her escapades when it was the storm and the papers were flying everywhere and she fucks Patrick in the car. Like Art ends up in his daughter's bed, meaning he knows that Tashi left. He knows that she went and theoretically went to go have sex with Patrick is the guess here. So they kind of are implying that even though there are these societal norms and technically, like, I guess you could call it cheating, right? She's cheating on him because he is not consenting to this. He is aware. And so I think that they are kind of implying here that, like, even though there are these, like, societal norms and boundaries that we have, like, she is kind of able to have both of them in this, like, weird way where, like, we could get into the discussion around, like, whether or not this is really consensual for Art, even if he knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one question just about desire that I kind of have for the group is, like, why is Patrick the more desirable one, at least for me personally, out of the two of them? Could be personal preference, could be looks, whatever. When we know that he's a scum. He's a scumbag. Like, what's up with that? Is this just more of, like, the fuckboy energy? Like, what are we gathering here from this? I can fix him. Is that what it is? Is that why we're attracted?
I think, well, I also just think he's, like, physically more attractive. I'm sorry.
I'm brunettes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not super into blonde men. Sorry to whoever might be listening. But so I think although he isn't, right? He also kind of has, like, a sort of a strange looking face. Like, he isn't, like, conventionally attractive.
He's like Adam Driver hot.
Like a rugged kind of, yeah. But I do think it is the energy of, he has more sexual energy, he has more charisma, he is less kind of just like, yeah, sure, I'll do whatever you want. And she is, like, a competitor at heart. So I think there's part of that too.
I think she wants someone who's a competitor and not someone she can dominate. And yet she likes the feeling of having control over Art. But it's not necessarily a turn on. It's just like, okay, I'm comfortable in this role where I can basically play tennis through you. But
yeah,
not necessarily a turn on.
And I think that also, I was going to say this with, you mentioned DB, he's sleeping in the daughter's room at one point, and there's, like, right before that, around that time, there's a scene where Patrick is asking her to coach him. He's like, your husband is ready to be dead. You know, he's like, he doesn't want to compete anymore. And he says he just wants to spend time with your daughter. And she seems to not be ready to go into domestic life. And part of that might be, you know, she never really got to compete because she had this terrible injury, but she's not ready to be done with tennis yet. And so I think that's part of the transition from Art to Patrick at, like, the modern day, is one of them can offer her that ability to keep being relevant in tennis and the other one can't anymore.
Let's talk about a lube I absolutely love, Uberlube. Uberlube makes sex better for everyone by reducing friction and increasing pleasure. Whether you're using it for solo sex, sex with a partner, or both, Uberlube has a long-lasting performance that lets skin feel skin. It has simple, body, and condom-friendly ingredients, is scent and color-free, dissipates when no longer needed so there's no sticky residue, and is recommended by leading doctors. Use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at uberlube.com. Flicking the bean, wanking, self-loving, jilling off, ménage à moi. All of these are different and very creative ways to say masturbation. For 21 days, I conducted a masturbation experiment with one of my favorite vibes ever, the magic wand. In a nutshell, I wanted to answer one question. What is the impact of daily magic wand use on my health and wellness, as well as my sexual experience when compared to regular sexual activity and no sexual activity? The results surprised me more than I thought they would. Want to see the hypotheses and the results for yourself? Go to sexedwithdb.com/magicwandexperiment to learn more.
I'm a feminist, but...
The Guilty Feminist is the award-winning live comedy podcast from me, Deborah Frances-White, which explores our noble goals as 21st century feminists and the hypocrisies and insecurities which undermine them. Previous guests include Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Hannah Gadsby, Sindhu V, Emma Thompson, and many more. To listen, just search for Guilty Feminist wherever you get your podcasts. And to get tickets for the live show, go to guiltyfeminist.com.
We're going to talk about the scene now where they're on the bed and he's kind of, like, begging her to say that she will leave him, right? So fast forward to present day. Night before the final, Art shares with Tashi that he plans to retire at the end of the season, whether he wins or not, despite knowing that Tashi is vicariously living her tennis career through him. She responds with silence, causing Art to beg for reassurance that she will still love him. She half-heartedly claims she accepts him quitting, but Art refuses to believe this. To motivate him, Tashi tells Art that if he loses to Patrick, she will leave him. Afterward, Tashi secretly meets with Patrick to ask him to throw the match, and Patrick agrees reluctantly. The two then have sex inside his car, and when Tashi returns, Art is sleeping in their daughter's room, indicating that he knows that Tashi snuck out. I just have in all caps, power, power, power. Like, Tashi has all of the power, and Art likes it this way. Like, let's talk about the fact that says she's gonna leave him. This is the Phantom Thread moment, right? Like, it's just basically like, what exactly is going on here where Art kind of needs this in order to motivate him in this way. And one interesting thing about this scene with all the storm shit going on, a friend of mine was like, oh, maybe the storm was indicative of what's going on in Tashi's mind. I was like, oh, this is like metaphor after metaphor. Like, that's interesting because she's clearly like all fucked up, that she's like constantly going back to Patrick, even though she clearly wants it this way, while Art and her kid are at home. So like, what are we thinking here? What's going on in this scene?
I like the storm thing because the storm seemed so surreal to me. Like, New Rochelle is like an hour outside of New York City. They don't have tornadoes there. Like, I was like, I have never seen the weather like this. Like, it could be a hurricane, right? Like, New York gets hit by a hurricane every once in a while. But for it to go from that to like the beautiful sunny day the next day, it did seem like
felt weird.
The storm was like a piece of fiction. It's like added, just like it wouldn't be really happening in August not in Westchester. So I thought that was interesting. I like the idea that it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
I also am thinking about that early moment after the boys first see Tashi play in the flashback, and she sort of tells them that tennis is kind of how she gets to know, or she didn't say it's how she gets to know people, but she said for a moment there, we totally knew each other, I think, was her line. Where it's like she was playing back and forth with this really strong competitor and she beat her. And they kind of had a little relationship there. And when Tashi isn't able to play tennis anymore, she doesn't have that way of relating to people. And so I think in a sense, like, the windstorm that is the chaotic interior world of Tashi is like, because she doesn't have the way that she normally connects. Like, tennis is kind of the way she connects to people, maybe. And that got taken from her very abruptly.
And then she's on the verge of losing it again when the storm is going on, right? Because Art's like, I'm gonna quit.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder like how much longer that act could happen though, like eventually Art will quit. Like, the character of Art like needs to retire at some point. Like, I think the average, I don't really know for tennis, but I know that the average career is like well under 5 years for professional athletes. Again, like maybe tennis is longer, but I know for sure for like NBA players and NFL players, it's like well under 5 years. I think it's
for
like
NFL. NFL is, but NBA is much longer, and the NFL is way more contact. So I would bet it's a lot longer for tennis.
Yeah, but probably less than 10 years. That's my bet. If the average career, right? So like they're in their like late 20s, early 30s, I think. So point being, like, they're going to have, the jig is up at some point. Like, he's not going to be able to continue doing this. So like, what will Tashi do then? I think that like their relationship is just so clearly based in like him being able to continue doing what he's doing. And like, yeah, I think it's kind of wild to me and scary if I was in a relationship like that and I was in Art's position to hear my partner say, well, I'm gonna fucking leave you if you do this. Like, that feels very unsustainable and scary. But once again, in the context of the film, it is kind of what he needs or wants in order to get motivated. So there are so many. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it's more what he wants than what she wants, right? Like, she doesn't come up with that sentiment. He's like begging her to say that. So like, maybe she would leave him, but we don't even know if that's true. She's just telling him what he wants to hear so he can be motivated for the game the next day.
Yeah. And like the whole scene of them in bed, right? Again, with these camera angles where he's kind of like basically like, she's the queen and he's like kissing her feet is like essentially kind of the energy of that scene. And yeah, I think like this, we're learning like a little bit more about like kind of the dominance and submission here between them, and how Art seems to be like such a clear sub to Tashi's dom, and like the kink that they maybe have around like saying that she's going to leave him in order to motivate him.
And to Patrick's dom. Like, Patrick's kind of the dom of him, too.
Right.
So, he's getting it from all directions.
He's getting it from all angles. Okay, so the day of the final, Tashi watches from the crowd as Art and Patrick are matched. Patrick wins the first set and Art wins the second. And as Art takes the lead late in the final game, Patrick begins to throw the match through double faults. However, he stops short of losing, and instead, that little bastard signals that he slept with Tashi using Art's serve tick. So he puts the ball in the center of the racket so Art knows exactly what happened between Patrick and Tashi. Stunned, Art allows Patrick to score until they're tied again. So there's this way that Art is kind of like, you're not getting off that easy. Like, I'll like, go ahead. Like, we're going to do this in a tie. Like, what exactly is going on here game wise?
I guess just like I don't have an answer to what is happening tennis wise because I don't understand tennis scoring.
I mean, I think to me, I also am not, I'm not a huge tennis person, but what I understand is that even though Art was, I think Art realizes in some way that like Patrick is throwing the match, right? Like there's something here of kind of like, fuck you. Like I'm not going to let you just throw the match. So I'm going to let you get a point. So this is actually fair. Like I think there's something there again about power dynamics and about Art recognizing like something is fishy here. Like I'm not going to just let you beat me like this.
And it's sort of the callback too to the first time they meet her, or like when they're playing each other when they're in high school, and he had originally said like, can you let me win tomorrow, and then you have kind of another like rigged game towards here at the end. And I think he says that, is it the steam room scene where he goes in, he's like, hey, can you let me win tomorrow?
Right.
So I did appreciate the callbacks, but yeah.
Yeah, I felt like the final scene, it was so fun to watch, and I almost felt like they were just like, it was the same, they were basically recreating the same vibe of like making out in front of Tashi as she sits back and enjoys it, but they were just doing it on the court. Like they were just so, it was so erotically charged.
Also, we haven't talked about music at all, but music plays a huge role in this film. And there's like a ton of loud synths, basically, like these 80s synths that are kind of like intensifying as the game goes on. And it like actually does make you want to sit at the edge of your seat of just kind of like what exactly is going to happen. And it's funny because this open doesn't matter. Like the whole context of this is like Tashi and Art wanted to do this because he could quote unquote easily win, and who cares? So it's funny that they're like making this thing a whole climax and a whole big thing when we zoom out, it's like the New Rochelle fucking Challengers Open or
But
whatever.
it matters for Patrick. If Patrick wins, he gets to go to the US Open.
That's true. That's true.
And otherwise he doesn't.
And Art has never beaten him before. So there are a lot of things that like are coming to play, and no pun intended. And I think like the whole context of them kind of playing in this final game, like you feel the energy, and Zendaya's character Tashi is also like really, really like waiting to see what happens next. And so this last part here during the tie break, Art and Patrick furiously trade turns. The rally intensifies, but they both jump for a volley at the net. As Art begins to slam the ball, he collides with Patrick over the net, and the two tightly embrace, ending their rivalry once and for all, maybe. Tashi erupts from the stands, does her same, come on, like screams, right? It's same exact thing when she won, right? Like there's something there. They had her character say the same exact thing in the same exact way. And finally, she's satisfied with Art and Patrick's tennis gameplay and relationship. And I have here, like, it was all about tennis and kind of about sex for her the whole time, right? Like, these relationships only rile her up and mean something big to her when their passion is in it. And so, just curious, like, how did the end of the film leave you guys? What did you think about kind of all of these other dynamics about their relationship and queerness and jealousy and power and all these things that we've been talking about.
It was just sort of a triumphant, like, fist pump moment. It was just so awesome.
Yeah.
And I really felt, I mean, I was very sad when she got the injury. Like, I mean, the way they set up that whole thing just felt very devastating. And so to see her kind of in the zone again in her own way, it was like, maybe these three were meant to be. Because, like, the injury happened, but, like, watching these two kind of fight it out, it does something for her that playing does for her. So, I don't know. It's like they're destined to be locked in this weird little triad.
Yeah, it made me wonder, like, what's going to happen after the end of the film, too. Like, if she is going to go on and coach Patrick, if Art does retire, which it seems like he's on the verge of doing, because it really seems like she's not ready to be done with tennis yet. And so I could see her transitioning. And then is she going to, break up her relationship too? Does she need to be dating the person she's coaching or sleeping with them? Or like what will be the dynamics there? It seems like she's not going to be content to just go into retirement. And you can see that with like how energized, like you're saying, Sadie, she gets from this match.
Yeah, I think she will coach Patrick. That's kind of how I read it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Intriguing. Yeah, I think overall I enjoyed this movie. I think it like brought a lot of interesting topics that like we talk about on Sex Ed with DB all the time to light in like a very popular way. Zendaya is one of the biggest movie stars on the planet, and this was a very popular film. A lot of people saw it. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of to see more memes, more things that come out about this, more Luca Guadagnino films that are erotic and hot and gay and have a lot of these fun themes. So thank you guys for chatting about Challengers with me and all the fun stuff that comes with it. Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel. Our communications lead is Catherine Cohen. Our producer is Sadie Lidji. Our marketing coordinator is Mitch Coburn. Our social media coordinator is M. Kirsty Frazier. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thanks so much to our featured guests, partners, and listeners. Want to partner with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. Do you have a silly sex story to share, need some advice, or have thoughts on the episode you just heard? Give us a booty call for a chance to be featured on the podcast. Check the show notes for the details. For more sex ed content, follow us on IG at sexedwithdb podcast and on TikTok at sexedwithdb. Want to know your sex toy zodiac sign? Go to our link tree on our IG now. See you next time.